contempt you. And when I think back, gee, how different my life could have been. But anyway, I'm trying to look forward now. And I'm just so glad. The reason I stress that is that I believe that it was divinely purposed that our paths should have crossed at the dialogues. And I believe also that even the challenges that we are facing are brought about to teach us and hone us in some way. We might differ on that belief and that life view, but that's just personally where I think we could potentially. So Natalie, who we are very excited to be having with us this morning, is an accredited mediator. I'm reading off my phone because I don't want to miss out a thing, okay? She describes herself as having a warrior heart, but being full of grace, anchoring her to hear the injustice and join hands to navigate the unwanted and often uncomfortable processes with clients through mediation. Natalie consults privately, mostly to the full spectrum of family disputes, including domestic violence, bullying, and harassment matters. Natalie, and this I've heard, each time I've heard her speak at the maintenance dialogue, she definitely has a heart for restorative justice. She volunteers through an organization called For the Children's Sake, doing court annex mediations at the Weinberg Magistrates Court, and she mediates a domestic violence court doing harassment, bullying, and domestic violence cases, as I said. All of this with the heart to restore and resolve broken down relationships and find themselves in court. She also assists in drafting parenting plans in children's courts, and I think having heard all of that, it makes sense to understand that Natalie's background is in psychology and pastoral counseling. And all of this enriches her capacity to mediate with a deeper perception and with grace. Natalie is an advocate for women, children, and refugees. She's involved in the fight against human trafficking and volunteers with an organization called Free to Fly. She's also an entrepreneur at heart. When she finds time for this, I don't know. But she's an entrepreneur at heart, paired with a wild flair for creativity, making her a business creative, owning a jewelry design and restoring furniture business. And for some of us being in the maintenance situations we can't access that side of you yet, but we look forward to it. So Natalie, over to you.
Thank you, Narissa. Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be here with all of you, and thank you for allowing us into your sacred space. Where you all are is a very sacred space. I know you're all on a journey. We're all on a journey, all of us. But yeah, I feel humbled to be here, and thank you for inviting all three of us. Like Narissa mentioned, Alison is a mediator. We're colleagues. We often co-mediate at Weinberg Court. And she brings a different set of skills, very insightful mediator. I've asked her to be here today because I'm recovering from a foot injury, so my head is still a bit cloudy and in pain, and I'm heavy painkillers, so you will step in when I miss something. She's heard this presentation, I think, before. Yeah. So do step in if I do miss something. And thankfully that my husband could drive me here, Dion. And like he mentioned, he's a walking...
I didn't say that.
He is walking jurisprudence, so he will answer all the legal questions. I'm not qualified to give legal advice. So if you do have any legal questions, Dion would be the right person, advocate Dion Ruiters would be the right person to ask those questions. But today, I think what I'd like to do, and what Narissa asked me to do, is maybe to share around the concept of mediation and what a useful tool it can be. Now, I understand to co-parent with a partner that is a narcissist can be very difficult, and even impossible. And I just want to disclaim, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a therapist, and I'm not qualified to deal with narcissistic persons. However, I have mediated and I've had such great successes in mediation with a party who's a narcissist. These cases I don't usually take on in private practice. If I do insist that they're in therapy and the couples are going for the parties. So if you are divorced, that the parents are going for counseling and how to co-parent, and have a therapist in the background that I work with. Okay, so I need to disclaim from the very beginning. At court, in the children's court, I've done a lot of these cases. Often there is a social worker that is appointed, so I don't have to deal with that side of things. So there is a social worker, and often the magistrates also appoint a psychologist. Our role is then to help the parents come to an agreement in terms of a parenting plan and sometimes maintenance. Okay, so that's really our role as a mediator. And I don't want to mention names, but I took some questions and I'd like to cover them in my presentation. So in terms of your experience with mediation, before I kind of launch into my talk, you probably had a psychologist who was facilitating co-parenting. Okay, now mediation ideally should be a 2-hour session, or 3 hours. Okay, if you're doing a parenting plan and maintenance, you can go on to 4 hours. We would do 2 sessions separately. And in very extreme cases, we need a 3rd session. Now, in all my sessions that I've done, all my consultations, I've literally only had 1 mediation where I had to do 3 sessions. So it's very rarely I need the 3rd session. 80% of my mediations can be done in 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours, that's 1 session. If we need a 2nd session, that's probably the 20% of the other mediations. So when you said mediation, it was probably facilitation. It's a different process. Any mediator that sees you for more than 3 sessions is not a good mediator. That is not your role, like Alison said. We're not there to counsel you. We're not there to, we're not parenting coordinators. A parenting coordinator is something very different from a mediator. They've got a different set of skills. They are often appointed by the court, by a magistrate, for high conflict cases and cases where there's abuse, there's mental illness, those kind of cases. They're appointed parenting coordinator. So and they walk a journey with you for however long, could be a couple of years. Okay, so it's a very different process. Sorry, I took down the questions. I'm just going to look.
Nancy, maybe ask questions
Please
as
do.
you're talking.
Yes, do.
So does one, as a standard rule, need all 3, a mediator, a facilitator, and a parent coordinator?
No. So when I do get into my presentation, I'll talk about the different types of parents I encounter. Now, the first set of parents are usually parents who have decided they no longer want to be together, but they will put their children in the middle, okay? And these kind of parents, in all honesty, they never have to take a parenting plan to the court to make it a court order. They usually, by agreement, enforce the agreement, okay? Now that's the ideal. Then we get another set of parents that, high conflict parents, and often they end up in the court, and the magistrate then starts with, sends them for mediation. And sometimes mediation is not successful, but then they appoint a social worker and they try and work with the parents. And if the parents cannot come to an agreement, and it's still very high conflict and there's a lot of non-compliancy on the parenting plan, then they appoint a parenting coordinator. And depending on what the social worker has reported on the assessment, the social worker will then they will then appoint a psychologist if necessary. Okay, I don't know if that answers you.
So in your parenting plan, does every parenting plan have to have a facilitator?
No, not at all. Not at all. No.
But you need to know who you will go to when things get pear-shaped.
Yes, parenting plan, I usually like to have a clause that says when parents are not, sorry, you're not a parent yet. Not a parent, but you're still married, okay? Yes. So when you're still married, or when you're still married and you have children. And the minute you're not seeing eye to eye, I like to say that's a time you attempt mediation. Because if you leave it and you have unresolved disputes just building up and building up and building up, one day one party's going to explode and then you cannot reconcile. Okay. The beauty about mediation is, in your case, is in mediation, you can unpack those underpinning things that you're saying, yes, divorce, and he's saying, no, not divorce. But we can get to the bottom of it. And we can see if we can paw the way forward for both of you to say, we want to try this, or we're going to agree to divorce amicably in a way that's kind for each other. And then I was introduced to something called imago therapy. I don't know if anyone's aware of that. It's a very useful tool to say goodbye in terms of when you get divorced. So to say goodbye in a loving way, and just appreciate another person. Thank you for the history we've had together. Thank you for the time we've had together, but also just cutting that cord and deciding to move on in love. So that's something that you could do after mediation. So mediation is, we've got this estate, we are married, how are we going to split stuff, how are we going to move forward? And once we have the settlement in place, and you guys sign it, you then take it to the divorce court and you're formally divorced. But it can be a process to restore you. And so, like Narissa said, divorce. I am a firm believer in restoration, and I have seen it many, many, many times where people be like, I'm not interested, I don't want to sit in the same room with them. But sometimes in the court setting, we are forced to kind of sit in the same room. It's not the ideal way to mediate, but I have seen restoration come in those spaces. I'd like to give you an example. I mediated a case in Wamba Court, in the children's court, and the magistrate said to me, the one party's here, the husband's here, but the lady's not here. And then he said, no, she's down the passage. She was sitting 3 meters away from him. And they walked into the room and you could just feel the anger and the resentment from both sides and shock. The air was so heavy, the magistrate said, good luck, and she walked in a few times because it was a high conflict case. And she walked in a few times just to make sure that everyone was safe in the room. But to end off, and she was crying. She was really hurt. She was crying, and it took a while for her just to let go before she can begin speaking. And in the end, they were flirting with each other. They agreed, they're still going ahead for the divorce, but they were flirting with each other. And when we were walking down the passage, they were giggling behind me and they were having such a ball, and the magistrate said, and now? So I have seen the beauty of mediation, but it's not easy work. To sit in the same room and to be so vulnerable, to expose your hearts and to say, this is how you've hurt me, and this is what I'm wanting to get back onto my journey of healing, or in how to help me co-parent as a better parent to our children. It's going to take a lot of hard work. And it happens in 2 hours, 3 hours max, it's intense. And the job of a mediator is really just to direct the conversation in a very constructive way to reach the end agreement that both of you want. And usually it takes a few concessions. So you're going to have to say, I'm willing to let go of this. I'm willing to let go of that, but I want this and I want this. And it's just meeting each other in the middle. That's what it is. That's what mediation is.
Yeah, just a quick question. Is this only for people involved in divorces, or can mediation be a conflict resolution between basically any party?
Yes. So
Okay.
it is seen as alternative dispute resolution, and we can cover a whole spectrum of disputes. So some of the work that I personally, you have it in civil courts, some of the cases that I love working in the domestic violence court. So under the domestic violence court, we have the harassment court, and it's often neighbors fighting with each other about trees, growing over, not being pruned, or parking in the
Sure.
wrong driveway, and that kind of thing. labor issues, those are the things that we can mediate. This is just an area of family and restoring family is where my heart really is, because I feel that if we have happy homes, we have happy communities, and happy communities just makes all of us feel better. You know, so that's really where my heart is, starting with the family, the cell unit. Any other questions? And you mentioned that you have booked a session for mediation, which is wonderful. Well done. I'm hoping that it would be a positive experience for you. But again, it takes both parties to commit to the process.
Look, fortunately, we don't have children, so it's not going to be about the kids that go parenting. I think, honestly, for him, I think it's just taking a box off, because it only works if you say, like, both people come together and admit we've got a problem. He doesn't think he's got a problem, and he doesn't think there is a problem, and he thinks it's a straightforward case. So already you're up against that. So I think for him, offering to do mediation, I think it's just ticking boxes, but I've tried mediation. I don't think he really is wanting to actually sort anything out, because he just wants to win, ultimately. And there's no empathy, so there's not about, you can't even say, you make me feel when you do this and you hurt me. They don't care. There is zero empathy. So going that route about, like, put yourself in somebody else's shoes, they don't care. They're out to win, and that's the part of it. So that makes mediation a lot more difficult. What he has prepared to do was say that he's prepared to sit in mediation for a maximum of 8 hours. Like it'll be probably chopped up into sessions, but he's considered, say, in total, he's prepared to do 8 hours. It's a waste of time, I don't care, because he's paying for it. But he's ticking off the box, that's what it is.
So already 8 hours, and there's no children, sounds like a lot. I mean, like, it's totally unnecessary in my opinion. But a really good mediator, and I'm saying a really good mediator can get, the process of mediation is, in mediation, I've seen people have an awakening. So they'll be like, no, I'm not at fault, it's you, I'm pointing fingers, I'm blaming, and it's you. But in mediation, I've seen people come to an awakening many, many times, and I describe it as great spit in the room. I can't explain it, you can't feel it until you're in the room. Where, I remember I did a case at Weinberg Court, and it was in the domestic violence court. It was a couple who had divorced. It was post-divorce. He was just bullying her and constant and that kind of thing. She had an attorney, a female attorney, and I use the word female because I want to explain what I'm saying. She had a female attorney, and she was wronged. She was totally wronged. And in the session, he had such an awakening that he apologized to her, and she chose to withdraw her application. And, we asked her, I was co-mediating with another person because of the level of violence, and I asked her a few times, are you sure you want to withdraw? She said, yes, I'd love to withdraw. Anyway, they hugged, which was beautiful. I mean, when that moment happens for any mediator, you cry yourself. And about 3 or 4 months later, I was walking into court, and her attorney was there in her robe. I forgot who she was. And she was calling me. She's like, hey, I just want to say thank you. And I was like, who are you? And she mentioned the client's name, and I remembered. And she said, my client is taking me out for coffee because the mediation was so successful. So the point I'm trying to make is that it can create that awakening in the other person, but it takes hard work for both sides. And it's not the easiest process. It's even hard work for mediators. But when that moment happens, and it's healing, that process is a healing process for both parties.
Quick one, slightly related, but just thinking to myself, I mean, with regard, I think you said earlier, you're not really in the whole narcissistic thing and everything, but we here are kind of in that pot, or whatever you want to call it. And it's like, I'm just trying to envision how you could mediate in such a situation where two people are really and truly living in two different paradigms. I mean, these kind of people thrive on
Chaos.
destructiveness,
They
and I
thrive
mean,
on
it just
chaos.
gives them a kick, man. You know, to see somebody else like suffering now,
Yeah,
it's like an addiction for them.
I get that, yeah.
They can't let it go. And from our side, we're wanting to, can't we get some middle ground here, kind of thing. And they're just thinking, geez, man, you're boring the hell out of me. Let's get some action here, you know.
Yeah.
And they want to destroy. They want to cause suffering, cause shit. And, you know, how do you mediate?
So like I said to you, a lot of the cases that I have mediated like this happen in the court. So they happen in the court. There is a psychologist, there is a social worker in place to help the couple or the parties navigate issues like this, to hold him accountable. Private mediation is really for people who say, I want to commit to the process. I'm going to enforce my agreement from my side, I'm going to comply. And, when I was thinking about the talk, I was very aware that you guys are sitting with this kind of problem. And I thought what we would do is really help you understand what your rights are as parents, more for the parents in the room. So help you understand what your rights are in terms of co-parenting, how rights and responsibilities can be complied with. That's really, I think, my role here today. Unfortunately, like I said, I'm not a therapist, and I can't work with those kind of cases.
Sure.
I hope that gives a bit of understanding.
Can I ask you something?
Yes.
In terms of the cases that you have mediated, where you've seen, like you quote, grace happen in the room. It's a wonderful way to describe it, by the way. Have you done any follow-ups with those couples? Have you seen them still committed and wanting to, stick with what they've agreed with? Or has it gone pear-shaped months later?
No, so what happens is often, I follow up with every client. So every 4 months you'll get a call from me. How's both parties? How's it going? There's always some kind of issue, but in mediation, we also structure how they're going to communicate going forward.
Okay.
That's a very
So you
important
give the tools.
the tools.
Okay.
Okay, so it's a very important thing that we will build into the parenting plan or the agreement, how to communicate going forward. And I must say that a lot of the cases are successful. There's maybe less than 10% that you have to redo another mediation like a year or two later, because they're still just not seeing eye to eye, and things just blow out of proportion. They're not sticking to the plan. It's a very small number that I've experienced, and those are the people that I just refer back to court. In fact, I don't even work with them past that space, because you can only work with people that want to work in the process.
Yeah.
It's a process. You've got to follow the process. You can't not follow the process and expect it to work.
Thank you.
And to answer your case, I know a case of, she's also a mediator, and we mediate a lot together in the domestic violence court. And her story is she was married to a narcissistic person. And their story is that they had a lot of, they were always in court. They had to work with a psychologist. They had numerous mediations, but they've come to a place eventually where they understand, and it took years. It took a long time. She said it took about 4 or 6 years for them to begin to see eye to eye. And for the last 8 or 10 years, he has complied with the parenting plan that's in place. When there's a disagreement, they just go back to the mediator. They've got a mediator. They restructure that parenting plan to work for where both parties are and where the child is. And their daughter has just turned, I think she's 17. She's just gone on holiday with her dad. But the child was alienated from her mom for a long time. But they've got to a place where there's no longer a child. They're not alienating the child from the mother, but rather the mother can release the child to go on holiday. So mediation can help. It will probably take maybe more than one session, but over a period of time, not like in a short space. You've got to try the mediation, go out and try and comply with it. If it doesn't work, come back for a session. Yeah, I hope that answers you.
Sure does. Thanks.
Okay. So with that in mind, yes.
Can you just explain to me the parenting plan and the maintenance issue? Is that one of the same thing? Or can you just have a maintenance plan without a parenting plan? You know, my husband and I, we co-parenting fine. It's just a case of going forward now as my kids are getting a bit older and not being financially independent yet. What is his role in financial support? Is it possible just to have a maintenance plan without needing a parenting plan?
Absolutely. So you can mediate just a maintenance plan. That's very possible. And once you come to an agreement, which becomes a maintenance plan, you'll both just sign a consent form, which you take to the maintenance court, and then make that an order of court. So you can just address that if the co-parenting is seamless and it's fluid and it's working for both of you.
And it will always go through to the court. It's not a document that we can just agree to by ourselves.
So you can agree to it by yourselves, and I said earlier that it's, you know, the parties enforce the agreement, and that's the ideal way. And I've seen many contracts that work like that, where the parties say we are agreeing to this, they sign it, all three of us, you know, would sign it, and they comply with it. And when you say, do you phone them? Yes, I phone them every 4 months. Sometimes I get phone calls and pictures from both parties saying, thank you so much for the session. Many months later, there's even a dad who rocked up at my house with his daughter just to say, I eventually got to see my daughter and here's the proof. So that was quite heartwarming that in mediation, the parties could agree to co-parenting and no longer alienate the child. And it was just by agreement. It did not become a court order.
So it doesn't always have to become a court order.
If it's high conflict and there's issues of abuse, there's drug abuse, there's alcohol abuse, there's mental illnesses, I always advise make it an order of the court to protect both parties, because then you've got some legal recourse. It's hard to have legal recourse if you've just, signed an agreement, even though there is a principle in law that any written or verbal agreement can be enforceable, but you can't take it to the police station and say, he's not compliant with the parenting plan, please go and arrest him. There's no legal recourse. That is why I say high conflict cases, alcohol abuse, mental illnesses, do make it a court order.
If you didn't make it a court order, but you did have a maintenance agreement and it wasn't upheld, what can you do then?
There's a legal guy.
Depending on whether it is a court order,
It's not
a court order.
I want to explain both. If it is a court order, then obviously the legislation will be applicable. Where there's no court order, that's when it becomes a little bit tricky. In a case where you have the written verbal agreement that you spoke about earlier, and that have been attained, that it have been complied with, then in terms of the written and verbal agreement, you will be able to enforce that if you feel like it. But it's going to be very difficult in a case where it is not reduced to writing and have not been made an order by the Office of the Family Advocate. If you don't want to go to court, you can always use the Office of the Family Advocate and get that plan registered with them. That's the best way. But if it's not reduced to writing, it's going to be so difficult. There are in the Children's Act provisions that says that both of you are parents, therefore you have parental rights that needs to be enforced without there being a court order. Then you still have to comply as a parent with it. Then you can hold a person liable in terms of the Children's Act. But that's also difficult to enforce with the police. The police are going to give you help to get that to be enforced. So the best way that we always tell people is get it reduced to writing. You don't have to go to court. You can go to the Office of the Family Advocate. Alternatively, the best route is make it a court order.
So sorry if I'm being a bit dim, but what do you make a court order? What do you get in writing?
The parenting plan that she's going to talk about, that parenting plan that you agree on in mediation, that can be made a court order in the children's court, or it can be made an order by the Office of the Family Advocate. One of the two, whichever one you feel more comfortable with, that's the way you can take it.
Mhm.
That order that you take or that your attorney might be able to draft for you, to make it enforceable, for you to be able to enforce your rights, you need to get it to be registered with the OFA or with the court.
Do you want to ask a question? Okay, I look like I want to ask a question probably. If my partner is being diagnosed with bipolar disorder, he would probably do, our case would probably be, we would need a court order, do you think?
So you can mediate, but if he's with a psychiatrist and he's on medication, I would still be happy to mediate in private. Okay. And we can, say we'll touch base again in 6 months. But he's got to take accountability to use his medication, to continue seeing the psychiatrist.
But that's all a bit of a big problem at the moment, because there's also addiction issues, which, I've got the mix of, I've got like all three, basically, going on. So, I presume I just pick the information as I go along.
Yeah.
Ask questions.
But do take my number and we'll see how best we can support you.
And they often do coexist in the bipolar.
Well, I think one's been
and
feeding off
narcissism.
the other for many, many years. I mean, I've probably always really kind of known, but also, you're talking about good mediators. I think with all due respect to the profession, there are good psychiatrists also who understand and who don't, and there are psychiatrists and psychologists. Again, with respect, who get manipulated by people, and then you just end up in this washing machine for years and years and years, and there's no out. And all I can just see is a lot of money being spent in the wrong places, possibly, which is quite terrifying, especially when somebody is self-employed, in a profession. So you get, there's it's a highly regarded profession, but at the same time, we're very vulnerable financially. So it's sort of like, I mean, look, maybe I'm slightly behind everybody or a lot of people here, where I'm just literally just starting, this journey. It's all very confusing.
You're right on track, Lisa. Sorry to just jump in. That's one of the reasons that as an organization, NASG, we are so committed to continually updating our resources. So when you go onto the website, you will see that we have lawyers who we will recommend because they are more experienced in dealing with the kinds of things we come up against. Psychologists, counselors, psychiatrists, etc., and even mediators.
I mean, I've been forced to go to so many marriage counselors who hadn't a clue what was going on. They just sat there like deer in the headlights. And it was kind of like, here we go again, same thing over and over again, over and over again. Years and years and years, and so much money wasted and so much pain. Pointless. But even trying to get into a system, being kind of, and I don't know if I'm speaking off kind of topic, but being kind of like forced into a divorce situation with somebody who's mentally unstable. And you have people in the profession, who are sitting in their offices and I was literally so ashamed of myself and so ashamed that I knew nothing that was going on in my life or financially, because it was never really made for me. I worked full time. But the whole thing of like suddenly, and all I could think was like, why are you forcing me to go through this really expensive process with somebody who's actually not even in control of their mental health? And I've got 2 small children. You're making me make decisions that I can't make. I'm not well. He's certainly not well. And this is a really broken situation. And you're pushing me through something that even a really well person would find really challenging. So, anyway, I'm listening.
I'm sorry that you found yourself in that space. And
Look, I think I've been in denial for years. I think even just picking the courage to come here this morning was, I backed down so many times because I don't want to live this life like so many people. I'm not making this about me or whatever, but it's embarrassing. It's, the whole thing of like even just trying to think of like where the time even just trying to manage any of this. It's just kind of like just going from one, just getting through the day. I'm doing it well, but I don't know how much more energy I've got left. Like probably most people here have gone through, and now we're going through. But anyway, look, I'm starting.
You're starting.
Starting, that's the most important thing.
And I think in starting, you're 50% across that hurdle.
Mhm.
And well done for being here. Thank you. Well done. I think you must recognize that. It's a big step. And I know you're probably feeling like you said, you're a deer with the headlights on and you just don't know where to go and how to process. But being here is just one step ahead of you. And I know, I've got my own journey, but today's not about me. I've got my own journey, but it was committing to the process. I've been in, if I had to count how much therapy I've been for in my whole life, it's probably amounts to 9 years. So 9 years is a long time in 42 years. It's almost like a quarter of my life that I've been in therapy. But that's helped me get to where I am and to be able to hold space in a domestic violence court and space to be able to help parties navigate the pain that they're going through. So
I think for me, and it's not that I'm not going to talk about it, for me, even it's sitting here in this short space of time, I'm sort of like going in and out of reality. Am I supposed to be sitting here? Is this me? Is that my life? But I'm not really. This isn't me. This isn't. But is he really that? Have I really? I still can't actually. No one's actually kind of like as if I want it on paper. Lisa, your husband has narcissistic personality traits. No one's actually ever really said to me because they don't live with him and they don't know. And my children probably do know, but it's the fact that like, you don't know. So it's me. I'm trying. And I know I have to go through this process. I'm trying to get out of the country. With 2 children, just going to make it even more complicated, probably. And like you were saying, Clint, it's easy in my head. I'm thinking, yeah, he could be reasonable, he can be kind, he's a good person, he's a good dad. But when the shit hits the fan, that's when it gets really nasty and gets really, really, for me, I feel incredibly financially vulnerable at the moment. So it's like, how do I manage any of those things? And yeah, anyway, I'll stop now because I'm rambling. But yeah.
It sounds also like that's where some individual support for yourself might be helpful.
Yeah, if I can find somebody who actually understands what I'm going through, which I find really, and that's how I ended up finding this
If you
group.
don't come right on the website, please reach out to me as well.
Yeah, because I've gone around in circles. I just don't have money to spare to speak to people who have to explain myself all over again to, or don't join the dots. I can't afford for someone else to join the dots. This is what I'm dealing with. Can you see it? If you can't see it, sorry, I need to go and find somebody who can see it.
absolutely.
That's kind of, maybe that's, the sort of like the impatience that I have now will serve me. But
Please don't apologize. It's so good that you're in this space. And do come back. Keep coming back.
Yeah, and on that note, I think the one thing about mediation, one of our principles of mediation is we might have the insight to see into the process, into where both of you are, but we can never make decisions for you. Whereas the court actually makes decisions for you, and psychologists how would you word it? You would know. So, would I want to say that they would give you the process to follow. So they'll give you the tools to go with. Whereas in mediation, we really just hold that space for people to take accountability. And that's why I started off by saying that it's in private practice, I would not take on a case if I knew there was no therapist in the background and you're not doing your own inner work. It would then be a waste of time for me. And the one case that I did give 3 sessions to, it was very clear from the very beginning, this is what was happening. And it was still unsuccessful after 6 hours of mediation. But a magistrate said, please just press in, just see if you can get them to a place where they can agree, and it just never happened. And it's no fault on you. Both parties have to be committed. I think that's the big thing you need to understand. It's not on you.
Can I ask a question in terms of mediation? Do you ever do cases where one person wants to get divorced and the other one doesn't, and you mediate through that.
Yes, yes. So I have been quite often in the domestic violence court, and what I've come to realize is one of my favorite cases was with a couple who came in. She was pushing for a divorce, and actually it was the other way around. He was pushing for the divorce, and she was trying to hold on to the marriage. And I was mediating with a family therapist. So in those cases, sometimes we are fortunate to have a family therapist and we're mediating. And he just said, I'm just not interested. But we said, okay, fine, let us help you then plan a way forward that you divorce in peace, because there are children involved. And so we began heading in that direction. And about 3 or 4 weeks or a month later, he then came back and he said, I want to attempt mediation and I want to restore my marriage because of whatever was said in that session. So the nice thing about mediation, again, is I like to say it can be an awakening process. And the awakening doesn't always happen in the room. It can happen afterwards. So, and this guy's, he was adamant. He's like, no, I'm happy with the divorce. Bring the papers, but we had to have a parenting plan. We had to have a maintenance plan. And during that whole process, he then turned around and he came and he said, please call my wife. Let's start the mediation process. And they're happily married as we speak today. They're still working. They are with the counselor. They are with the therapist doing their own process. But we came to a way forward in how to bring them back onto the same page. And it was really understanding the underpinning stuff that was causing conflict and misunderstanding and mistrust in the relationship. So one of the mistrust that was, presenting was he would say something. He said, when I send her a message during the day, she responds like 4 hours later. And she's a bank manager. She said, we're not allowed to have our phones when we're working, and we're in customer service. You know what the queues in the banks look like. So it was her explaining to him and just coming to an agreement that I will check my phone every hour when I go to the bathroom, and I'll just respond to you and say, look, I can only chat in 2 hours' time. But that was the agreement they put into place. It was a lot of PT for her to try and implement it and to comply with that agreement, but it was essential for her to build that trust with him again, if that makes sense. And so each mediation session is very, very different. You really just bring your stories to the table. I like to use the therapeutic and facilitative mediation, which is really people bringing their feelings, their needs, your desires to the table and saying, how can we align the two? And that's where you see the restoration.
I don't mean to be skeptical, but honestly, when you're dealing with a narcissist, that's not going to happen.
Yes.
That's okay if there's healthy relationships and people don't have the traits, but when you live with a narcissist person, that's not going to happen. I can tell you now, it's going to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. It's just not, it's not my reality, and I don't think it's a reality for a lot of people here that are dealing with narcissistic people. Because they will tick the box and say, okay, I'll go to therapy, but they don't think there's anything wrong with them. So it's actually like a futile exercise, right? So they'll go because they'll give you that little bit of hope. And you're okay, I'm going to forgive, we're getting into it. Then when they get you hooked in again, they pull back out again. So the whole approach and avoidance tactic is part of the control of the manipulation that goes on 24/7. And like this lady here, you get to the point where you doubt yourself to the point that you actually don't know if you're Arthur or Martha, literally. And you don't know if you can get a Jekyll or Hyde walking in the door, literally, on an hourly basis, on a daily basis. So I get for me, for the intention of this chat and in this forum, I think, yes, it would make sense if you have a parenting plan or a maintenance plan that's been negotiated. But in terms of relationships being restored, I don't want to be a skeptic, but highly, highly unlikely. I've been through more than 10 years of therapy. Highly unlikely. Because they don't believe there's a problem with them. If you take them to therapy, they back out after the second or third session because they get asked hard questions. They don't like that. So you're getting this whole like she says, okay, you just in like this washing machine and you just keep going and going and going unless you get to the point and do your own self-work. So I think your role works brilliantly and with maintenance plans and when there's domestic violence and parenting plan. But I'm skeptical about partnerships being resolved through mediation when you're dealing with somebody that's a narcissist specifically, not when there's two healthy people in a relationship and there's no mental illness and all of that.
In my experience, all the mediation did was equipped him with very dangerous weapons. Because every single thing that was discussed in mediation was used as a stick to hit me.
They learn all the time. They learn the tools and they learn the lingo and they learn the behavior that they need to
So your
weaponize it.
vulnerabilities and your honesty becomes a weapon that they use against you literally. And there is nothing more paralyzing than that.
But haven't they been doing that prior to the mediation anyway?
Yeah,
Because they've been, in my experience, collating over all the years where the weak spots are, what are the vulnerabilities,
yeah,
and those become
they weapons.
the slingshots.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
And I think that's perhaps, I could be wrong, but perhaps where the level of experience of the mediator comes in.
Yeah.
And that distinction you drew, Natalie, which I think we need to be very mindful of, the difference between being in a session for mediation versus being in our own individual therapy.
Absolutely.
And I think that's actually quite vital, even if that's all going to rest with you at the end of the day, and our abusers, if I can call it what it actually is, don't go for therapy because of course they don't think they have a problem. But I mean, I've just found that being in that space where I can have some support for myself, that has then helped me. So I've had my own trepidation about going to mediation, which is forthcoming. But I need to go because I need that parenting plan reviewed.
Correct. So the
And
parenting plan
yes.
will work. And
But I'm still very scared. I am hell of a scared. Every time I've been to maintenance court and had to be in court with the same individual, I cannot even do eye contact with him. It doesn't mean I'm not scared, and I think mediation calls for a lot of faith. And there's going to be a lot of personal work that I'm putting into myself in preparation for the mediation. But maybe it calls for a level of openness. I don't know. Is mediation actually possible with a narcissist?
Alison would like to answer.
Don't you worry, and I think just sorry. So I think what I hear, I might be wrong, is that a lot of you are scared to be in the same room as your abusive narcissistic partners, whether it's a man or a woman. For mediation, I think for me personally, there's a difference between a narcissistic personality trait and a narcissistic personality disorder. The disorder is incredibly difficult. I agree with Natalie. Sounds like you're dealing with a disorder.
but it's not diagnosed because they don't go to therapy and only a therapist can
Only a
diagnose
psychologist
it.
can diagnose it.
Correct. But so the percentage of diagnosis is so
It's
minimal.
little, yeah, it is. But they need to buy in. But what's important to also know with mediation is if there's a high conflict, high volatile relationship between two parties, to put them in the same room is not beneficial. It's not going to serve either party justice. So then to do a mediation with both parties on Zoom. So you don't have to see them, you don't have to be together in the same room. Otherwise, what you can do is have caucus sessions where it's you and the mediator in a room and him and the mediator in another room.
Yes, correct.
But even some people don't want to go to a venue together with the fear for their lives, or the fear that, for the emotional abuse can be worse than the physical abuse sometimes. And so mediation is still possible. To do a parenting plan, to do a divorce settlement agreement, to make an order of court, if the mediator can, all good mediators should offer individual caucus sessions, so that parties can both feel safe. So it is possible to have a mediator sitting in a room with two parties on a Zoom session, and if you want to then break up into break rooms, then you can have the mediator and you talking together without the other party hearing, and then come back. So you can do breakaway sessions as well on Zoom. So that's a very, very good tool to use for very high conflict situations.
And my suggestion is the route that I'm that I'm going to be doing is, if you're going to be in the same room together, I don't have a problem with that, but I will have my attorney with me. Because when you're dealing with a narcissist, it's pretty much like, I never said that. And you always need somebody else to almost like be there as witness, because it kind of like makes them more hesitant to actually lie or gaslight you. So my choice, I don't mind being in the room with you, because I'm past the fear factor part. It's been 20 years of pure fear factor. I'm so over that now. But I will not see him without my attorney. Otherwise, I know if I don't have my attorney there, he will bamboozle me.
Okay, so in terms of mediation is a very confidential process. Basically, anything shared in mediation cannot be used as evidence in court. So nothing can ever be taken as evidence in court. Even if you were vulnerable, I know you said they would use it as sex to kind of break you, and you can then say to a magistrate, this was shared in mediation, whatever he's doing was shared in mediation, and he's violating the rules of mediation. You can have your attorney there, but whatever will be shared in mediation, your attorney or yourself can never say, and your attorney can't dispute in court that that's actually incorrect, because that process is totally confidential. When you walk out, you literally with no notes. The only notes that might still be there is notes that the mediator might take to put into the agreement. Once the agreement is written up, it's torn up, and the only even your agreement is worded in a way that only the outcome is there. How we got to the outcome is never in the agreement. You can never leave that from that space. So you're protected in that way, if that makes sense.
No, I get that. I'm having my attorney just because he's my voice. And it's kind of like, if you want to put it like my safety blanket, it makes me feel safe. So that's the route I'm taking, opposed to that. I know you can do it individually, you can do it by Zoom, but my choice is we can do it together in the same room, I don't have a problem, but my attorney will be there.
But your attorney will remain silent throughout the process, right? Because in mediation, your attorney is not actually allowed to
Yes, no, that's fine, but it's
Yes,
there,
that's fine.
he's there, that's all
Support.
he's there, yeah.
Exactly,
Because
yeah.
because after the session, for me, it's more important to understand that did I miss anything, did you hear that correctly?
Yes.
And that's part of the prep work, and that's part of the planning and the strategy, so to speak. But that's what he serves as there, but also the emotional support, just physically being there.
Does that not compromise what the attorney does after, though, if he was involved in something?
It does, and that's why personally,
Because
I
it's
would
it's separate stuff and you're throwing them all together.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So maybe you would have another person as a note taker, as a support or something, but not necessarily him, because maybe later in life it might come back somehow legally. I don't know, the legal man's just left.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something a little bit off the direct topic, but related to having somebody with you. What I've noticed in one situation where I had somebody with me in meeting family who are not the direct narcissist, but are part of the, how do I say, the narcissistic clan. Yeah, what I noticed was that their behavior in front of this third person suddenly became exemplary. It was just astonishing to me. Anyway,
So I agree with you, and maybe my talk, like I really, asked Narissa, I knew what I was, kind of knew what I was walking into, and I said to her, I'm not qualified I'm not a therapist, I cannot, work with parties that suffer from narcissistic disorder. I'm just not qualified. However, I think my heart is around, there is that notion, a lot of people say, because my partner is a narcissist, I will keep my children away from the father or the other parent. And my heart is really against that. Because we know research shows that when children grow up without a mother or a father, for whatever reason, there is that wounding, the mother wounding and the father wounding. And to try and heal from the father wounding and the mother wounding, it's almost impossible, or it can take a lifetime. I know, I've been there. And so my heart is really to encourage parents. I get you're not getting along. I get that you never want to see each other again. But let's be conscious that when you choose to divorce and you're co-parenting, when you're handing over the children, when there's a handover period, what atmosphere are you creating for the children? What are they internalizing? Because what we found out is, like I said, sometimes there is a social worker, and I read them, there's a social worker in some of the cases that I do. So I read the reports, and the reports say the child gets very anxious when it's time to go to mom or it's time to go back to dad, and vice versa. And what happens is, I did a case and he was a narcissist. Fortunately, I was with my supervisor that day. He was also caught off guard. We didn't even know what we were walking into. But he was quite confrontational. He even got out of his chair. He was about to, almost want to attack us because he's so right. She was with the therapist for her own growth and support, and they were together. They were instructed to see a family counselor to work through the process of co-parenting, and there was a social worker. And what had happened is this child was 18 months old. She was biting her fingertips till they were bleeding. And the reason was, when it was time to go back to dad, or she was living 50-50 with mom and dad, she would get anxious because mom and dad couldn't look at each other, and they were angry with each other, and that tension of that handover was too much for her to process. Now, an 18-month-old child cannot verbalize that to you or I. And so they sit with this internal turmoil. We might still have the tools as adults to try and work with this stuff, with the issues that are, that we face, but an 18-month-old cannot. And so it was really getting the parents to understand, can you come to a place where the concession, where you say, I am going to choose to respect you, to greet you, to even put a smile on for the sake of our child when we do hand over. I am going to allow you to come into the house, into the yard, to the front door, so that we're not meeting in a car park, handing over children. That's really where my heart is. And I think that was sort of the purpose of my talk today, is really just, it's difficult. You can't always restore relationships, and I get that and I respect that. And I've walked some journeys where people have chosen to part. But it's really just saying that children need their parents. Because we see that children who do not have, especially the father, there's a lot of research that shows when children do not have a father, we see a lot of social ills presenting. They start first of all, in young kids. I've done mediations, a child being 10 years old, needing a scribe because mom and dad have high conflict relationship post-divorce. And he was totally fine until they got divorced. So dad has moved out the house. He's already internalizing that as rejection. My dad has left us. And then sorry, can we close that door? Okay, close the door. Yeah. And post that, post the divorce, the child is, he then develops learning difficulties. And then they had to get a scribe to be able to write his exam. So the issue we were dealing with in mediation was, besides the normal expenses that we have, we now have to come up with 1,500 rand to pay for a scribe. And we know exams, we've got like 6-7 exams. So that's twice a year they need to come up with this kind of money because the child needs a scribe to write exams. And that could have been avoided if the parents chose to respect each other, be civil to each other, to not speak bad about the other parent in front of the child. And these are the things that I talk about in mediation when it comes to co-parenting. Just creating an environment that is kind to each other, not best friends, kind to each other, respect each other, but an atmosphere that can make your children still feel loved.
What happens if the narcissistic person is abusive or emotionally abusive? Surely it would be better for that child or those children to be just with the mother than with the abusive dad.
But you can't prove that, you see. That's the difficulty, and also with dealing with a narcissistic parent. They use the kids as tools. They use the kids for their own gains and their own strategy and their own whatever you want to call it. That's one of the traits, that they use the kids. They don't care that they hurt the kid or they hurt whoever. Everybody becomes a tool of some sort, even their own children.
Can I give you an example
Phil
of
said earlier, you know, they become, in public, they're such exemplary.
Absolutely.
They make us look like
Community
because,
pillar heads.
You know, it's like, I once tried to describe my husband to my sister, and she thought I was crazy.
Yep.
Exactly. So she said to me, what are you talking about? He's such a nice guy. Who are you?
Kind, generous guy.
Yeah. And I was like, Jesus, I think the light only went on the day he gave me a blue eye. Then everybody was like, can't be.
I think also, like, say, we've been on school holiday. I'm a teacher, so we've been on school holiday. So I've been doing everything with the kids, and my husband is. And it's always been like, you know, working really hard. Right now it's like working weekends, you know. And I said, you're going to take any time off, and I try to be kind without getting drawn in. So I say, you know, you're going to take any time off. You know, for you it's important, especially when I'm very aware of his illness more than he is, and. I even said then last night, you know, I'm back to work Monday, and I said to the kids, you know, maybe you should ask Dad if he'd like to do something with me today. You know, and I had said to him before that, you know, what are you doing on the weekend? Well, I'm working tomorrow and Sunday. And then it was just, it's really hard. And you see the kids then go into the room and they're like, you know, Dad, do you want to do something? You know, it is. Then everyone gets all excited and they're going off to go drive out to the mountains and see it. It's like it's all his plan. And I've done everything, and I facilitated everything, and I have been all the time. And then, you know, and I know I want my kids happy with their dad, and I want them to trust their dad, even though I know they don't. But, you know, I want to repair and restore all of that. And then, and I don't feel sorry for myself, but at the same time, I kind of think like, did he even think of bringing them to the shops, let alone go out for the day with them? And I know they're going to come back this evening, and I'm okay. I'll be okay with it. I know they'll come back this evening, and they'll be all like, oh, we had a great time, and blah, 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 and he'll have spoiled them rotten because he has more access to money than I have. So all of those things, and that as when you're already doing all the work on all the things that you're doing already. It's really, really hard. And I know that's where also I have to do more work on myself than I'm doing already. You know, and I need to do a lot more work on myself. But, you know, it's all of those little, and they happen how many times a day, those little examples happen. You know, it's like, you know, with my daughter's birthday, I made a birthday card, my son was making a birthday card, and my husband arrives, you know, home and says, you know, and I can see he's feeling really guilty, and he says, oh, did we get a family birthday card? You've never in our whole history got a family birthday card. And I'm looking at him going like, what do you mean a family birthday card? And basically what he's saying is like, oh, I actually didn't really think of this. You should have. It's like, and I said, I've done everything. I've organized everything for the birthday. You know, maybe you could just go get a birthday card.
And Lisa, no matter what you do, it's never going to be enough.
No, and it's the way it's said.
Ever going to be enough, no matter what you do.
Never. But anyway, so those examples of, I get, as you're talking in my head, I'm getting like so much guilt. You know, I need to do this, I need to do that, whatever. You know, my kids are not stupid. They actually can see probably more than I can see most of the time. But I do want them to have a healthy relationship with their dad, and I do worry that if I take them away to another country, because it's my security of the future, it's not me being mean.
Yeah.
You know, then they will be the kids without the dad. Are they better off? You know, do I sacrifice myself again for the last probably, you know, healthy 20 years of my life? I've already given 20 years. Do I give the last sort of 20 years so that they've built a decent relationship with their father? Or do I live with the guilt that I didn't leave when I should have left, and now I didn't leave because I thought I was doing the right thing? And I know there are all things I need to talk about in therapy. But, you know, I think probably a lot of us maybe are in the same sort of a situation where we're constantly thinking about those things. And we do need to be reminded of the kindness and the grace and the restoration of belief in people, and that our children will hopefully learn, you know, to see the red flags, and, you know, and to be able to not just balk at it all and kind of like run away and blame everybody else for issues that are difficult. And they can actually learn to build and read those issues and be able to trust themselves and trust it. I think maybe the one thing that I feel so kind of, I find so hard to allow myself is and everybody here probably says, I couldn't see it coming. I thought I knew myself better. I thought I knew other people, but when you said about your sister,
Mhm.
I don't think anyone that I know, nobody understands what I'm going through. Absolutely not one single person.
Mm.
So, so it is hard to kind of put that, what you think is reality and what you want to be reality and what you want to be good, in the hands of somebody who's going to just mangle it and throw it back to your face. That's I think it's the fear probably everybody here has going into any room. Like I've seen my husband in all kinds of counselling sessions and all sorts of things where I've literally walked out and just went,
Who was that?
what went on? Like literally, and then after I just said, you're paying for these counselors, because I just felt like this is a joke. And I've had people, I've gone to see male counsellors, especially for him. And he didn't even find fault with my tone when I was speaking with him. No, there's no use going into all these little tiny details, but the point is you have so little trust and you want to have so much trust because we're all good people.
Yeah.
But it just gets manipulated and it gets abused all the time, over and over and over again.
Can I just ask a question of the parents here? How does the narcissist affect the children? Does he or she turn the children against you?
Yeah, he's their best friend, and he's he makes out to be like he's just wonderful, and there's something wrong with her. Buys the kids.
So they use the children as
kids
the tool.
tools. Yeah.
My husband doesn't do that.
He does.
No, he mostly plays Disney Dad every now and then. Otherwise, he completely ignores them. Like they.
Yeah, it can go either way.
Yeah.
Like with my husband that I'm divorcing at the moment, my son never liked him. My son was 13 when my husband that I'm now with, when the two of us got together and started dating. And from the onset, my son just never ever liked him. He used to say to me, Mom, there's something off about this guy. And yeah, Clayton tried to win Keanu's heart over and, be a model stepdad, for lack of a better word. But there was just something off that Keanu just never ever liked about him. And about a year ago, Keanu came to me and Keanu said to me, he was actually the one that awakened me to narcissistic personality disorder. And he said to me, Mom, your husband's a narcissist and I don't want to be around him anymore.
Wow.
And
What amazing insight.
to the point where his own children, because he's got 3 children with 2 other women, his own children started seeing bits and pieces of his personality and started removing themselves. But this was obviously at a much older age. When they're younger, they're easier to manipulate. But as the kids grow, as they become more aware of their own world that they've structured, and remember, our children are different from when we were growing up. Our children are,
They're emotionally intelligent.
but they're also bombarded with so much information constantly. Social media is such a monster in their lives. And at their schools and in their interactions with their peers, they have very different conversations when we were 16 and 17 years old. They're exposed to so much more things, socially and otherwise. So they're very, very well equipped with identifying things that don't sit right with them because they are taught to do so. So yeah, there's definitely more hope for the kids to not be manipulated in the situation going forward as they grow up. I'm a testament of it, from not just my child, so it's not just from me and my side, and what we've instilled as parents into our one child that we have, but also from Clayton's side and his own children that has seen it and identified with it and started moving away from him as they got older. So yeah.
Thank you.
It's a very complex and multiple layered thing though. There isn't, I often think, a one size fits all.
No.
Because as you said, every situation in mediation is different. And I do agree with you that as far as always possible, children should have access, full and complete access, certainly full love from both parents. However, that can also come with complexities because, you know, someone, like in my experience, a father who was totally uninvolved, never available to do anything, but from the moment of summons was now suddenly,
Best day of the year.
you know, he is the ultimate hero, and he's got all the financial backing. He's this good, upstanding citizen. They are remarkably charming and charismatic and all of that. On the downside, apart from what I perceive as alienation of the one child, there's a very scary thing that whilst my children have access to their father, the one is showing these very definite traits himself of narcissism.
Yes, there'll be a chosen child. There'll
And
be a golden
that
child.
for a parent, for a mother, is a really scary thing.
There'll be a chosen child.
When I've sat through conversations with this child of mine who's only going to be 14 next week, and the circular conversation, this is an exact replica of what I went through with your father. So now I sit with the question of, am I failing this child? But I don't want to stop him. And in fact, if he could choose, he'd spend all his time with his father because father's it. Father's got the gym, father's got the money, father's got the everything, father's taking him to France.
Yep.
Where does that leave me?
Yeah.
You know?
You're constantly, like, you're not only just on eggshells living with the person, you're on eggshells for exactly those reasons. Like I've got an 11-year-old son and a 15-year-old daughter. My 15-year-old daughter is incredibly emotionally intelligent. She has spotted things way before I ever did. And we're all empaths, the three of us in our house. And when we were talking about if we would go back to Ireland, and I said, the one thing that would worry me is that if my son was given a choice, he'd probably say, no, I'll stay with Dad because I don't want to hurt Dad. I don't want to hurt his feelings.
They take on guilt,
Yeah, exactly. And they see it with me, I think, all the time. So, and my daughter said, yeah, well, I often think about that too. And then I look at him and his reactions, he's grounded. His reactions are okay, he's just going to start going through puberty, so I need to bear all that in mind when I might, when I'm awake at night, worrying about everything. I kind of think, will either of my children have bipolar disorder? Will it manifest in them? And they've already, I've talked about that and how scary that is, but, I reassured them lots of other different things about education and stuff. And then it's like, will they have, addictive personalities? Will they learn to have, to manage their lives and manipulate people, through what they've seen? And this is all they've seen in their lives, is living with this person, and where I back down, and then when I don't back down, what the consequences of that are. So yeah, that's what, the term chosen child just absolutely terrifies me, if there's ever, that sort of that was in mediation, do the sort of like the personalities of the children come in and the choices of the children and the age of the child that they decide what they want to do. So, that's could be like yet another level of heartbreak. That one child decides to do one thing and another child doesn't, and whatever, and you don't want them to do either.
Yeah.
Whatever, but sorry.
I just wanted to ask a question back to what you were saying, where the one party wants to divorce and one doesn't, and you said with the mediation it doesn't work. What is best to do in that situation? Obviously, everyone says just go to the lawyer and you carry on that way. Is there possibilities where sometimes you can just pause a bit and maybe you come to a different mediator, or a year later go try again and maybe you get somewhere, or what?
Yeah, so
Have you got any advice on that one?
Yeah, so the other thing is, so in mediation, it's really about what do you want and what do you want. That's what it's about.
And
trying to find that
same?
common ground. And if you cannot find the common ground, especially when there's no children involved, then it's great. And I would then say, this is not advice, and this is maybe outside of mediation, but then I would then say, we all know what's good for us. You know what's good for you. I know what's good for me. And then take the necessary steps to do what's good for you, what's going to protect you, what's going to make you feel safe. And I don't believe in divorce, but I do believe that sometimes divorce is a better way to live than to stay in a toxic relationship. That I can tell you, I'll never even question someone that. It's sometimes better for a person to be divorced and separated than living in a toxic relationship. As simple as that. And also maybe outside of mediation, I don't know if I can just maybe get a bit personal, but I was a single mom for 8 years. And so I identify with some of the moms in the room. I know the pain that you're going through. I always left the door open for my daughter. She's 19 now, our daughter. She's now 19. We've always left the door open for her to reach out to her dad. He's never made the effort from day one. So she would say, he was also Disney dad. Come birthday and Christmas, he would spoil her. And I could never afford to buy her the clothes that he bought her. The toys that he bought her, I felt like a useless mom. I did. But you know what? I was paying the school fees, the medical aid, the food, the rent, everything. He only gave me, and this was a court order, he only gave me 300 Rand a month. Nappies used to be 480 for 10 days. So I chose after the third, that's why I got, with all due respect to the court, after my third court appearance, I just decided the court is not for me. I'm going to make it work for us. It was hard. I worked 2 jobs. I sold creams and a whole lot of stuff. That's why I'm an entrepreneur at heart. Because I had to think of everything to make money. I literally slept like 2 or 3 hours a night. I didn't have a washing machine. So at night when my child was sleeping, I was washing by hand. Okay? And then I was working during the day. So I came from a really, it was never, with my daughter, we've had a really tough journey. One day, she was under 2 and I was still studying. I was doing my last year at university. And for dinner, we had 1 orange, a slice of bread, it was the crust of the bread, and a packet of soup. And we sat in the kitchen and we were we were staying with an angel, an old lady, and she gave us a room. And she said, I must just pay my water bill and my electricity, which was 80 Rand, she was blessing. So we're staying with this lady, and we were in the kitchen and she was in a high chair. And I gave her the orange and the slice of bread, no butter. And that was her dinner. And I had the cup of soup with water. And she finished and she said, Mommy, more. There was no more. But her dad was living in a house with a swimming pool and 3 cars. So for me, the best thing for me was never going to be mediation or going to the courts. I could never force someone to comply or to come to the party. I had to decide what I wanted for me and for her. And it was triple as hard for me to get there. I went to therapy every Saturday. I had to get a babysitter every Saturday. And I committed 1 hour to therapy just so I could be strong within myself and withhold the external pressure. That's what I had to do for me. I've never spoken bad about my dad, ever, ever. In front of her, to any of my friends. Dion doesn't even understand why I'm not even angry at him. It's something I worked with in therapy. I was like, I'm not going to give that energy to you. But it took a lot of work to do in therapy to get to that space. And when I asked him, can you, she was now going to grade 1. Would you like to buy some school uniform? Kids don't like school uniform, so it wasn't a priority for him. So he said no, he wasn't prepared to pay a deposit, nothing. But he came to me and he said, I can put her on, get a funeral policy. I looked at him like, she isn't dying anytime soon. She was 5, turning 6, she's 19, she wasn't dying anytime soon. I don't need a funeral policy. How about you offer towards medical aid? And at the time, might I add, she had low lung capacity. We were under a pulmonologist, so we were under high care. And my medical aid was one of the best. But I paid that. He never contributed a cent to it. So I think I'm sharing my story with you that you have to decide what's best for you. This is outside of mediation, so this is off the record. You need to decide what's best for you and for your children, but on the same token, keep the door open. I've always kept the door open for her. She just chose to stop seeing him. Why? Because he never showed up. So she would say, I'd like you to come to my school concerts. And we would invite him, and he'd say, yes, I'll be there. And at his school concert, I'll be there. My best friend will be there. My brothers, and my stepsister. A ma and pa that took her as grandchildren. We will all be sitting there. She'll come out on stage, and she'll see all of us, and her face will just drop because one person wasn't there. And this is the rejection and abandonment I'm talking about.
Mm.
And she then decided, after a period of time, you haven't showed up, you haven't valued me, so I'm going to find a way without you. And part of my presentation, but it's too late to go there, part of my presentation is we have a high percentage of fatherless society and homes. And so it is all our mandates, everybody in the room, to change that. And sometimes I believe it's not about a biological father or a biological mother. Find people who can fill those roles for your children. So I was fortunate enough that I had 2 or 3 male figures who became that person for my daughter. And then when I got married to Dion then obviously took that role. And we still have those male figures that are part of her life. Pa is one of them. And she still says at 19, she says, Mom, when Pa hugs me, it feels like everything's going to be okay. And he's a gentle soul. He's literally taller than me. Maybe shrunk now, but he's about my height. He's just a gentle soul. He doesn't say a lot of words, but he's there. Mm. And he was healing in my journey, in my father wounding. Because I only got to find out when I was 20 that my dad was my dad. And so there was issues of abandonment, rejection, identity. Who am I? So I'm not who I thought the last 20 years were. And I think if you haven't experienced it, you will never understand it. So literally, I felt like the carpet of my identity was swept from underneath my feet. So even things like my surname, I'm not actually that. I remember the first Christmas, and I came from a very dysfunctional family, very dysfunctional, but there was love. I don't know if you can understand that. Mm-hmm. Very, very dysfunctional, extremely dysfunctional. Dion can't believe half the stories. But there was love. And so on Christmas Day, the first Christmas, I sat in the room with my whole big family, with 6 of us, opening Christmas presents, and I was like, but I'm not one of you. Our surnames are not. I'm not one of you. My identity had changed. But it took a lot of therapy to realize that my biological, to first heal that wound, the wound of being rejected, and to realize I actually miss nothing without him. But it's a process you've got to go through. And children can go through that as well. My daughter's going through it in it, and she does art. She studied Cambridge. She did the Cambridge syllabus, and I'm sure she won't mind me sharing this on air, but she did art as in AS, and her topic had to be your life story. So obviously start from conception, and she used a lot of our photographs of when I was pregnant, when she was born, right up until now. And our art teacher said, do you know the story about the snail? Apparently snails are one of the creatures that once they fertilize the other, they walk away and they leave. And so a lot of her art, you'll see like a snail shell. And I said to her, I checked in with her, this was last year, and I said, love, you're working through you're telling your life story in art. It must be really painful to go to those places. Are you wanting to see a therapist? Where you're at? let's talk about it. And she said, Mom, it's actually very therapeutic. Because she's like, having Dad there for the last 8 years, he's given and he's healed the parts of me that my friends had at school. Because I wanted to be like so-and-so. I wanted to have what so-and-so's dad did for them. And when Dad came, Dad did all of that for me. So I was fortunate to marry someone who then helped to heal in that journey. But I also know before Dion came into the picture, there were other male figures that I put into place to be that male figure, father figure for her.
Sorry, your daughter thinks Dion is like a dad to her.
Yes.
Is that what you? Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So I like to say that, again, it's what's going to be best for you, what's going to make you a happy and whole person on the inside. And then really to create that space for your children, but always leave the door open for them. Let them make their own decisions, and just be kind in the whole process. So for every time he didn't pitch, I didn't shout at him. Then he'll rock up at my door at 8 o'clock in the evening, and I was like, but she's in bed now. She's had a long day, she's exhausted, she's in bed now. Let's try again and I would say, let's try again on Sunday afternoon. Come and have a play date. Yeah, sure, I'll be there at 2 o'clock. Did he pitch? No. He just never showed up.
And she joined the dots herself.
She joined the dots herself.
Mm.
But she used to tell her friends when she was like 4 or 5, my dad, I love my dad the most because he bought me this. And I felt like a rotten mom because I could maybe only buy her pencil crayons for her birthday at the time. And Dad could buy a poker stick and a bicycle and all these lovely stuff. And a little computer and those kind of things. So she joined the dots herself later on. And that's what I want to say to the moms in the room, that it's hard and sometimes you've got to put the extra work and maybe do everything, but they will join the dots at their own time.
It kind of derailed your presentation.
Yeah, but I think that's fine. We can leave it. I think whatever you wanted to say has been said. Yeah. But if you have any other questions, you're welcome to ask.
I have already shared the slides with the group.
Okay.
So if there are follow-up questions, may they contact you?
Absolutely.
Oh, are we online at the moment?
We are, but they don't know your names.
Okay, but
And they can't
when
see
I
us.
joined the Joburg group online, the people that were joining online asked questions.
Okay, so Michelle, we look if there's any questions. Do you want to look at it?
Yes.
Are there any questions? In the chat.
Are your details sent through or?
I think they're on the last slide of the presentation.
Oh, okay, thank you.
No questions.
No questions. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for allowing us to share this space with you. I certainly have learned a lot. I always say that I am a mediator, I am because of my clients. I go on a journey with you all, well, with my clients, and they teach me the most. It's not so much what I learned in training, but it's more what I learn in the rooms. I learn from my clients.
Where do you practice from when you say you work in corporate, you talk about private practice? Where?
So my office is at home, so I work from home.
Okay.
I can, I've got clients in the northern suburbs, so I often drive out to them, but I like to meet at a neutral place. So a place that's not very familiar. I'll never meet in a house. It will always be a neutral place.
Okay.
Yeah. I've also consulted in attorneys' rooms, so they have an attorney, and the one party will contact me, and I speak to the attorney. I use their rooms or their offices if it's not in the southern suburbs. I've even gone out as far as Saldanha Bay to consult because it was easier for me to get there than for two parties to drive in separate cars. So they would pay my petrol, and then we just met at an attorney's office.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Natalie. And apologies that we hijacked your presentation that you specially prepared. But perhaps in the future we can have you back again.
Absolutely.
And you've given us certainly a lot to mull over in the meantime. So thank you so much.
You're
Yeah.
welcome.
Joining us available
Sorry.
anytime.
I was gonna say it's really nice to have some softness actually.
Welcome.
Hi. Kelly, do you know how to?
You can just say stop live or
End broadcast.
That's it.